Okay, well, that set me up nicely, Greg. Thank you for that. And thanks for mentioning my podcast channel. We've been running for 9 weeks. Episode 9 was live this morning. Each episode lasts a maximum of 10 minutes. There's sometimes they're between 7 and 9 so far. And they are on the Apple podcast thing, if you can find it. Apple are always changing the way they organize things. It's also on Spotify, maybe it's easier to find there. So it's pretty much everywhere where you would normally look for a podcast. And it's called The Zen Doctor. So that's the little plug for the podcast channel. I'm welcome to all you again, the familiar faces. And today, what have we got for you? Well, the other thing, if you're watching recorded vision of this on YouTube, first of all, subscribe to me on YouTube and you'll get automatic updates of all the stuff that I do. And then take a deep breath and be very brave and actually register for the live show. Because as all artists and entertainers know, there is no substitute for live entertainment. Anyway, now, on social media this morning, I didn't actually have a clue what the opening topic was going to be, but it came to me pretty much as soon as I woke up this morning. And I posted on all the usual social media things a little teaser for what's going to be on the show. And the best that I can remember is if you're feeling that the world's not listening to you, if you feel that people are abusing you, not appreciating you, beating you up, running you down, and if you feel that life shouldn't be as difficult as this, and that it's about time you got your voice out there, then this is a show for you. That's more or less what I said. And I said, and the reason is we're going to connect you to infinite intelligence, which is a subject that comes up almost on every show now. And strangely enough, on my website, the two blogs or pages, the blogs that are looked at the most, downloaded the most, are the ones on infinite intelligence and also on bioresonance therapy, which we haven't mentioned yet as far as, again, I can recall, but maybe one day we will. And as we've discussed before, connecting to infinite intelligence, or whatever you want to call it, the invisible giants, God, your higher self, your spirit guides, these are all words that people use and mean something to them. And it's not easy because it's counterintuitive. Much of the brain is counterintuitive. The harder you try and find infinite intelligence, the harder it will be to pin it down. It really is a case of sitting back, letting go of stuff, and being in the moment. Because it's in the moment when the miracles happen. It's in the moment when stuff comes to you that you've never thought of before. And when you look back on it, you think, where on earth did that come from? I never thought of anything. Actually, it was quite clever. We don't like saying that about ourselves. But if we think it came from outside ourselves, I guess it's okay. And I've come up with some of these deep topics that we've discussed, just like the reptile brain, are hard to describe in words. And the people who are experts in this area that I've talked to, and my own experience of working with people, is that it works best in metaphor. People have always found it easier to communicate difficult and different ideas through stories, through fables, through role play, through metaphor. Not using common sense and logic, because common sense and logic are not your friend, or not always your friend, because certainly not the way the reptile brain thinks. So what I'm going to say for the next few minutes is based loosely around the subject that is called 3 principles. And we might have mentioned this in passing, and certainly whether I mention it or not, certainly it's something that I find as a grounding philosophy, just as I do with Zen, which is why this is called Ask the Zen Doctor. I've studied Zen for years and years and years. 3 principles for a lot less than that, maybe about 5 years. But the thing that I found fascinating about 3 principles is there's a lot of Zen philosophy in it. If you just changed a few of the words, you could even say it was much the same thing. So the 3 principles, this is a Scottish guy called Sydney Banks, who had a revelation. All kinds of stories about infinite intelligence or whatever, they all seem to have a revelation somewhere or a burning bush. Well, he had his revelation, which took him to a transcendental level, higher than he'd ever been before in his life. And it empowered him to develop his ideas, and he quickly gathered a following. And there's plenty of records that support the fact that he did a great deal of good for people, particularly disadvantaged people. So he talked about the 3 principles, and they are very simply thought, consciousness, and mind. And I'm going to start with thoughts, and this is where I've been working on my own metaphor. We have, according to the experts, 70,000 thoughts a day. I have no idea how they've calculated that. I would say that's a very rough guesstimate. And if it was me doing a guess, I would say it's actually probably a lot more than that. But anyway, whichever number it is, it's a lot of thoughts. And we are unaware of the majority of them because thoughts are by their nature rather, they're unformed. You can't put your hands around it and say, this is a thought. And it hasn't most of the thoughts never reach consciousness, so they just stay in the murky swamps of our reptile brain. And the only reason we know if we're tuned in enough is that there are times when we get hunches and intuitions and gut feelings about stuff. And as my words have said, they tend to be very visceral. And if you ask somebody, well, why do you think that? Why did you come out with that? They'll have a very hard problem putting it into words because of the nature of the unformed thought that I mentioned. So the metaphor here is an artist. Now, even my best friends would never describe me as an artist, a painter, but I'm going to be one today. Not in reality, of course. In virtual reality. So if you can imagine, in one hand, I have one of these old-fashioned artist's palette. And the traditional painters, and I think they still do the same when I watch people doing things down by the side of the Thames River, they have all of their favorite colors separated from each other. Now, I don't know why they have so many, because the last time I checked, there were only 7 colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. But they have a lot more than that. And that's not enough because they want even more. So they'll take with their brush, they'll take a bit of this color and they'll put it there, and they get a bit of this color and put it there and rub it together. And then when they're happy, it's exactly the right shade, they'll get their brush and they'll make a few marks on the canvas, just like I'm doing here. And you can watch these people painting by the side of the Thames, and if we've got nothing better to do on a day, I will watch them because I admire their skill. I wish I could have some of it. Maybe I can. Maybe I haven't tried hard enough. So this is what the thoughts are. The thoughts are on this artist's palette. And the artist is starting to do stuff, taking some of these thoughts and putting them on the end of his or her paintbrush, and he's painting them on the canvas. Now, the canvas is another word for the conscious mind, because I've said there's nothing in the reptile mind that we can put our senses to it, those 5 senses that we have: what we see, what we feel, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste. And of course the 6th sense, which is the intuition, maybe the 7th sense, which is the magic. But anyway, let's just deal with the 5 we know about first of all. So the artist is painting, and these thoughts that the artist is having, I mean, he or she will have a thought. They're trying to create something. They're in the creative mood. And so their own thoughts are being transmitted onto a canvas that's in front of them that was blank but is now taking shape, and we can start to see it. So that is we've talked about a little bit about thoughts, and now we're talking about consciousness in three principal terms. Other people describe it as the thoughts being on a cinema projector, and the cinema projector paints those thoughts onto a big screen, and that is consciousness. So what consciousness does is take all of these things that are percolating up from the depths and puts them in a size, shape, and form that we can relate to. And this is where we make the big mistake, because we think that what we're seeing on the canvas or on the cinema screen is reality because it looks familiar. Well, the truth is that it's not. It's an illusion. It's our construction of the universe as we see it from our perspective. Now, Greg, Johnny, all of you on the show now, you will all have your versions of reality. And the bad news, folks, is they're all an illusion. And the good news, as long as you know that, it means you don't have to take them too seriously. It means you can live with some of these illusions. Now, if we all had a consciousness that was brilliant at making these wonderful representations of a fantastic, abundant, joyful life, that would be one thing, and it would be, I guess, it would be a good thing. But sadly, for one reason or another, the kind of movies that we make in our mind, in our conscious mind, from the thoughts that come up, are the horror movies, the ones that you go into the shop and you say, that one there. And the man said, are you sure you want to watch that? It's sick, it's horrible. You won't sleep for a week. Oh yes, that's the one I want. In fact, I'll take two of them, the same. So we're good at that. And of course, when we play those kind of movies, we embrace the two emotions that we've talked about a lot. Well, there are more than two emotions we talk about, but a lot of it is anxiety. A lot of these videos are this is what's going to happen when I have my interview with the boss on Friday. It's making me feel sick to the stomach already. Or this is what's going to happen to my new business that I've just set up. I can see so many problems. This was a bad idea. My friend said, don't go into this, but I wanted to, and I've made a big mistake. I wish I hadn't spent all that money setting stuff up, but it's too late. I'm just a miserable failure, as always. So those are the kind of movies we make, and you've learned a few techniques along the way about how to make the better movies, because we have this gift called visualization, and it means that we are free to visualize exactly what we want. It all depends on the limits of our creativity, even in our conscious mind. I haven't even got up to mind yet. So we can play around with pictures. Any of you who are familiar with NLP in any shape or form know that we can take big, scary pictures and make them smaller, 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 and we can push them further and further away so that they lose their close emotional attachment to us. And when people are describing their horror movies, their hands will tell them, because you ask them the question, where do you see this? And they'll say, it's right here. So we push things away. And of course, we do the opposite to the things that we do want. So when we're out playing sport, we have a big picture with us right in the middle, and we're looking down and we're seeing this hero posting personal best, more importantly, having a lot of fun. So there we are. We've talked about the artist taking the thoughts, painting them onto the canvas of consciousness. And what happens there? Well, by our own efforts, nothing happens after that. What we've got on the plate, on the canvas, on the screen, is what we've got to work with. Unless we can sit back and quieten some of this stuff that's going on in our minds and be more aware, what some people would call being more mindful of what's going on. As some people would say, in a state of meditation. Everybody would say it's a state of calm, because when you're in a mind state like that, that is when you allow the chances of tapping into infinite intelligence to increase. And infinite intelligence is that wisdom in the moment. It's when you think of something that you've never said, never thought before, but it catapults you. It catapults you to a solution to a problem. It catapults you to the best life performance you've ever made. It catapults you to developing even further the relationships that you have with the people in your life that are most important to you. And of course, the things that disconnect you from the possibility of tapping into something greater than yourself would be the opposites, just like the opposites of the visualization exercise were. So that is my version of 3 principles in a nutshell. And there's no question that whatever I call this, whether I call it Zen philosophy or whether I call it mindfulness, it's the most important thing that I know that helps me, and it's the most important thing that I know helps the people that I work with. And we could spend literally years talking just about the kind of stuff I said in the last few minutes. So that was what I hadn't prepared for today, but that sort of came out with a little bit of prodding in the morning when I decided roughly, I thought it was time to bring in 3 principles somewhere. So now, of course, this is when you allow me to climb off the hook and to have a little sip of water and relax a little bit, get myself back connected to in the moment. And it's when we all want to hear what's on your mind. What's your take on some of this stuff? What are some of the things that you've tried along these kind of lines that have worked or not worked? What kind of questions do you have? So as Greg mentioned, put up a hand and he'll unmute you if you can't do that yourself, and the floor is yours.
Yes, okay, guys. So do you have any questions, comments? Would you like to share anything? It's got to be me again then.
It seems like every week it has to be you with the first one, Greg, and then we get to the end of the show and there's 3 questions left and we can't answer them. But anyway, I guess that's life.
So this is about the thoughts. Do the thoughts come from our unconscious mind, or are they coming from the unconscious collective or collective unconscious, from the field? Or are they coming from both actually? So yeah, how is it? How is it working?
Yeah, I can't give you an answer to that. An exact answer, because there aren't any, because as far as I'm aware, nobody knows the answers to those questions. But what I feel is that those kind of thoughts deep down from the reptile layer, I don't believe they come from the collective unconscious. I can't exclude it. I mean, I can make a case either way for this one, but I don't think so. I think the collective unconscious is more likely to be higher up, when we talked about mind, because if I was Carl Jung, and as you can tell that I'm not, he would say something along the lines of, you don't need to use any other word than the collective unconscious. We are one. Once we lose this feeling of separation from each other, and that we think we're special, and then we've lost our way on the spiritual path. It's only when you can look up into the sky and recognize how trivial you are that it's the letting go of ego, and that opens you up to all the other stuff that comes around. So that's, to me, is where the collective unconscious would be. It's almost another word for infinite intelligence, really, because if you've got a collective unconscious there's 8 billion living people on this planet. If you could tap into every one of them, You'd probably have a headache, but you'd be pretty clever. And you see, the other great thing that I was going to mention about this infinite intelligence, and this is, I guess, in some ways is the most important for all of us. It's a great leveler. We live in a system that values some things that people would question, do they have any value at all? But anybody has the ability to tap into infinite intelligence. It has nothing to do with their gender. It has nothing to do with their ethnic background. It has nothing to do with their size. It has nothing to do with their nationality. It has nothing to do with their IQ. It has nothing to do with their education. It has nothing to do with their background, whether it's impoverished or spoilt and rich. It's a great leveler. And of course, the odds are always stacked against the people at the bottom of the food chain, but there's always hope. And we've all got examples, and we've mentioned some of them, of people who do. They've got this ability to tap into something else that transcends them from this impoverished level to something much, much higher. Comments, Greg, or anybody for that matter?
Yes, just to finish off, and then Sue wants to say something, just to finish off that subject. Yes, I think that we normally get the thoughts from the unconscious mind, but sometimes we get those hunches, those sparks of brilliant ideas, and those sparks, I think, come from the unconscious collective unconscious, rather. What is the way, we actually spoke about it, but we can say it again. What is the way to get those sparks more often? And I guess, and then the other question would be, the next question also is like, if it's in the collective unconscious, then it's not only us who are getting those sparks, the other people might get those same thoughts and ideas at the same time, I guess.
Yes, well, I'm going to really struggle remembering all those. I think there were at least 3 questions, but anyway, let's start with this one. The gut feelings, the instincts, the visceral feelings that I mentioned earlier, I would agree with you that, in my opinion, they are most likely to come from the deeper layers of the brain, and they're important. And they're best left as visceral, because the mistake we make is that we try and put words to those feelings. And once we do that, we might be quite accurate, but we'll never be totally accurate. It's a bit like going back to the artist metaphor. Now, particularly in abstract art. I mean, I'm thinking immediately of Picasso. I mean, his stuff sells for millions and millions and millions, goes up in value all the time. And you can look at it and it's a few splashes of paint on a canvas. Now, I've looked at these things for hours and I just don't get it. But clearly there's something wrong with my perception there, because the marketplace certainly does. So I guess that somebody like Picasso, he is getting these magnified, deep, visceral feelings inside. And this is the best way he can try and get those things out so that other people can understand them. And that's through his work. So Greg, I agree with you there that I think the gut feelings come from that level. I think what we get from the higher level, the mind, the collective unconscious, we've talked in the past about the difference between thinking and knowing. Now, thinking is all going on in the conscious mind, and ego has a big part to play in all of that, as always. And knowing is just this certainty. It's this rock solid faith, and putting the boundaries there between what's intuition and what's this knowing. It's very tricky, and maybe the boundaries don't even exist. These things, after all, they're only models. So have I left anything out there, Greg?
Yeah, I think the one question left out was how to be connected to that field, the quantum field, as I call it, more often? How can we get those sparks often?
Well, the way we get the gut instincts, the intuition and stuff like that, it's basically a calm mind. I mean, the answer is as simple as that. Achieving the calm mind is more problematic, particularly in challenging times. But that's where the mindfulness, the meditation, the heart math, the havening, and some of these other things we've talked about in previous shows, those are the tools. But the knowing, I mean, when you see it in another person, when you see that they've had this flash of knowing, that's when you can, you've seen this huge shift in a person's mind state. And they'll often, if they're clients of mine, always they come to me for a reason, and often, usually the reasons are because they're struggling with some part of their life and they don't see a way out of it. I mean, their problems are so real, they're right in front of their eyes, wakes them up at 4 o'clock in the morning, it's the first thing they think about. But in that kind of mind state, you're not going to find those deeper connections to outside or to inside, wherever it might be. And as a therapist, of course, your job is much easier because you're not that other person. They're describing to you the best way they can the video that they're living, but it's not the video that you would watch. You can watch it in the client and you're thinking, gosh, I can't understand why they like this program. I mean, I wouldn't have it on my Netflix choice list, this one. Why can't they go to this one here, there, or there? Now, you can't tell people stuff like that because they're so wrapped up in themselves, they just, they regard it as offensive, quite probably. So you have to lead them through these various tools that we've talked about so that they can know, sometimes even for the first time in their life, what a calm mind looks and feels like. And then that's when they have their revelations, because they'll come back and they'll say, do you know what I've been doing the last month? And I say, well, no, so I haven't been doing any remote viewing. I haven't been following you with spies. So you better tell me. And they will tell me. And they said, the funny thing is, in my business, I told you how we were struggling. I've taken it in a slightly different direction because I bumped into this friend and he'd heard what I was doing. And he said, why don't you just pursue that line? You've always been interested in that subject and you could wrap it in with everything else. And I said, and that's what I've been doing. And it's like I haven't had to do any advertising. The people have just been coming to me. And I feel so much better. I feel so much more confident about life. Everything's going really well. And I'm kicking myself, really. And actually, if I'm upset about anything, I'm upset about myself. I'm angry because I could have seen that. And I kind of knew that it was something I could have done, but I just talked myself out of it. So that is in the moment wisdom that comes from a calm mind. And everything that I've read and studied, they all say, you just cannot overestimate the importance of mindfulness, meditation, calm mind, whichever way you find that. And there's way too much anxiety out there at the moment, that's for certain.
Okay, thank you. So, Sue?
Thanks. I had a few thoughts. I think it's gone, you moved some of it on. I was thinking the word about thoughts and creative thinking. Actually, there are different things in a way. There are the thoughts, the repetitive, the habitual things that go through your mind. And also there is that connecting with, or the creative, when something comes to you or knowing. And so I was just thinking there are sort of two processes going on, aren't there? And one, you have to get rid of the thoughts, as you say, to get the calm mind to get something else. But while Greg was talking about collective unconscious, I was thinking it is interesting with collective, the collective consciousness or mind or the whatever, is how different people in different parts of the world come up with similar new ideas, so that something's invented in one place, but then you find a whole load of other people have done something very similar. and it's almost as if they're all tapping into the same unconscious. So something's going on greater than any individual.
Well, I agree with you 100%, Sue, and I think you've described that in a very elegant way. And what we have is this sort of eternal battle between our conscious mind, which is doing a, what if and analyzing and all the rest of it and creating a lot of stress. The ego's in there somewhere. And then you've got the wisdom of the unconscious. And so, yeah, this is the balance. And it is strange that you mentioned these things all happening at once. There appears to be no connection between them. Well, this, of course, is exactly what Carl Jung would have called synchronicity, because he would say these things are connected. And in the field of sport, we see the same things. They called, one author has called them hotspots. There are little areas of the globe that produces most of the world champions. And there are some logical reasons for that, because there's normally a very inspirational coach involved somewhere. But even so, that doesn't explain the whole thing. It's almost like, there's a sort of an attraction to certain people, and this is where they come to learn whatever it is. I mean, tennis is an example. A lot of the Russian tennis players are brought up in much the same kind of area. The UK is pretty good, or used to be, at table tennis. And there's one small part of a town, even within a few streets, where most of the world champion table tennis players have come from. So, that's a coincidence. So, yes, we live in a very curious, strange world, but definitely I think we're all aware of those kind of connections that we can't explain.
There's also the possibility, I mean, like the 4-minute mile, when somebody can do it, it actually opens it up to what seemingly was impossible as a possibility, which actually frees up a lot of people to say, well, if he can do it, I can do it too.
That's very, very true, Sue. And, that record had stood forever. And once it was broken by Roger Bannister, not a million miles from where I am now, and he was a doctor as well. How on earth he managed to find time to be a doctor and train to break the world, to break the 4-minute mile, I'll never know. But within days, it had been done about 10 times. And now it's nothing. So yes, it was a psychological barrier, as so many things are. People used to say that the human being could never run a 4-minute mile, and that if they did, their lungs would burst. They just wouldn't be able to process all of that breathing and air going in and out. Well, Roger Bannister showed them that it was wrong. And one of my poker players that I worked with, she was regarded as the top female player in the world. She sent me a book, or she recommended me a book. You said, you've got to read the book, The Rise of Superman. And it's a brilliant book. And they're all the kind of sports that this person would have been interested in. A lot of it was to do with surfing and rock climbing and free climbing and all these kind of things. But these people who are doing these extreme sports, they're breaking records every single day, because they've got the mindset that everything can be improved. And you could say they're reckless. And I guess they are, because they have no fear. And then they do break records. And of course, every year, some of them, I'm afraid, are no longer with us. But there you are. That just shows, records are more virtual than real. Do we have anything else, folks? Or do we think this was more than enough for a Thursday night?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we can end the show there. And I hope I have given you food for thought. Just to leave you with a final thought or two. Don't spend too long sort of trying to analyze all this kind of stuff logically, because it will give you a headache and it won't take you any closer. In fact, it'll take you further away. Just approach, if you can, a life of openness, a life that has no impossibilities, only possibilities. because we all get a surprise when a possibility actually takes root and grows. And usually when you talk to people about that, they say, I would never have believed that for a moment. I must have been lucky. Well, they certainly have been lucky. And I've written a book about luck, as you know, at least one book. And there's no question in my mind that luck is not random. Luck is not random. We can do things to increase our own possibilities. And the more possibilities we have, the more good things are going to happen. And I truly wish that lots of good things happen to all of you. And one of the things that you are doing that I can tell you for sure is giving you a good start, is that you're putting yourself into the game. You're going to the trouble of registering for webinars like this. I know from your experiences that you have an energy that you put in all kinds of different directions to do with your work and your leisure and everything else. So you're examples of making your own luck. And there's more than enough luck to go around. Don't get the scarcity mindset like, if I'm lucky, then it means somebody over that side of the world is going to be really, really unlucky. It doesn't work like that. The more luck we make, the more luck we spread around, makes the world a happier place. Okay, see you next week and have a lot of fun in the meantime.